Okay, welcome to another Orbiter 2010 video, and in this video I'm going to pick up at the International Space Station where I left off in the last video, and that was where I brought the Dragon capsule up to the ISS and docked it. So in this video I'm going to see what I can do about returning the Dragon capsule back to Earth safely, and my goal is to bring it down reasonably close to Cape Canaveral. So let's go ahead and jump in and give it a shot. So I'm going to bring up base sync MFD, and I'm going to target Cape Canaveral. And I can see here by looking at base sync that the orbit that I'm currently on will pass 3,000 kilometers away from Cape Canaveral, and obviously that's not going to be close enough to get to the base. So if I look here ahead to my second orbit, third orbit, and so on, I can see down here that on the 8th orbit I'll be within 16 kilometers of Cape Canaveral. And that's definitely close enough to make some kind of attempt at deorbit and reentry and landing. So I'm going to go with that orbit. So the first thing I need to do is fast forward time until I get out to that point. But there's something I want to point out here. If I press V as in Victor to bring up the battery charge indicator, it shows that my battery charge is currently 88%. And something I found out on my first attempt at bringing the Dragon capsule up to orbit to the ISS is that if you use too much time acceleration, these solar panels won't track the sun properly and the battery charge will ultimately get depleted. It turns out that's not completely a problem, because I also found out that if the battery does reach 0, what you can do is come out of time acceleration, allow the solar panels to retract the sun, and then they will in fact charge back up even after it's got down to 0. But if I can avoid having the battery charge get low to begin with, that would be my preference. So I'm going to warp time ahead, and what I'm going to do is just keep an eye on the battery charge, and if it gets too low, what I'll do is I'll come back to real time like this, and when you come back to real time, the solar panels will reset themselves so that they start retracking the location of the sun like they are there. And once they've reset themselves to the sun, then the battery charge will continue to go up. So that's the plan. Let me jump back inside here so I can keep track of where I'm at. So let me go ahead and warp time ahead, go to 1,000, and obviously when you get around to the shadow side, or the the side of the planet where the sun is set, obviously you're not going to get any battery charge. So I have no choice on this side except to watch the battery get depleted. And you can keep an eye on where you're at by looking at map MFD. Here I'm in the shadow, so obviously I can just warp time ahead here, and now I'm back around to the sun. And once you're back around to the sun, if you want, you can press F1, and I actually saw the panels reset there. I don't know if you saw it, but there they reset and they're tracking the sun. And even though I'm tracking the sun, if I still go too quickly, because of the fact that the vessel will move relative to the sun, so even I'll still have to watch during the day to make sure that they don't stop tracking the sun. So anyway, I guess you get the idea there. So let me just quickly get through this as fast as I can. So let me make sure the panels are tracking. Keep an eye on the battery charge there. It's going up, that's good. So we'll just go to 100 here to make sure I'm getting some battery charge. And go to 1,000. And let me go back to real time for a minute. And it should be reset by now. And go to 10x, 100. coming around to the shadows, so I'll go to 1000. And back to real time for a minute. There are the panels reset. And go to 10, go to 100, batteries charging. So in short, during the day, I can do 10 or 100 acceleration, and then at night it doesn't matter because you're not going to get any battery charge anyway. So I'll go to 1000, and back to the day side, back to real time. Panels have reset or will shortly. So I'll go to 10, batteries charging, go to 100. See, now the batteries aren't charging even though we're in the day, so now I need to back off for a moment, and there the panels just reset slightly. And this just ensures that you have enough battery so that when you do eventually re-enter, you can use the parachutes and have battery charge to control the other things that have to be controlled. There we go. So I'm just going to go ahead and get through the rest of this as quickly as I can. 100 batteries are charging. Okay, go to 1000 to get through the shadow. Come back to real time. Okay, I'm going to go to 1000 now because I'm coming up here to the shadow side. Okay, batteries are still charging, so we'll keep it at 100. Now it's going down, so let me go back to real time. There you can see the panel resetting. Go to 10. Go to 100. And we're almost there. We've almost got down to the last orbit. Go to 1000 to get through that shadow side. Okay, now we are on the last orbit, so we're done with all this battery nonsense. So now what I want to do, I know that the halfway point is approximately over here by Australia. And I also know that once you reach a distance of about 19,000 kilometers, it's actually just a little bit after that, that will be the halfway point around the Earth. And once the distance then starts counting down, that's when I'm going to undock and begin my preparations for the deorbit burn. So let me go ahead and warp time ahead to get to that 19,000 kilometer point. Coming up here in just a moment. See, there's the 19,000, and now the distance is counting backwards, so I'm halfway around. Control D to undock.
Translation.
Take a look at the external view, and I'll use some translation here to back away from the space station. That'll be good enough. Maybe translate over a little this way, just to make sure I've got good separation between the Dragon and the ISS when I do the deorbit burn. Alright, that'll be fine. Let me switch over to orbit HUD and go with a different color, something I can see a little better. Guess orange works. I'm going to go to the retrograde position. I'm going to bring up Aerobrake MFD, and the view that I prefer here is, I don't actually know what it's called, but you press PG to switch to this page, and then PRJ to switch to this graph map. This is the view that I prefer. So now I'm going to press target, Cape Canaveral, and I've actually practiced this once or twice just to make sure that I'd have some idea what I'm doing. And what I found here, when you normally, like if you're in the XR2, you would do this deorbit burn, and you would burn until this green line here, which looks like a dotted yellow line, and you might have to view this full screen in order to be able to see it. But you would burn until this is all the way touching this yellow square here in the middle. That's your target. That's where you want to end up after you enter the atmosphere, and this is the base. You don't want to do that when you're burning down with this type of vessel, and the reason why is because this module, this is called the trunk. That's the solar panels in this piece, and we are going to detach this part before we actually enter the atmosphere. And when we do that, it's going to change our aerodynamics. It's going to change it quite a bit. So we want to burn down only until this green line is extended, like out here toward the Bahamas or somewhere down there. And once that green line's got to that point, then we'll detach the trunk, and we'll use the RCS thrusters in the Dragon to make the final refinement as to where we actually want to have our burn finish at. So I'll show you what I mean. So I'm in the retrograde position. Go ahead and start the burn now. And this does take a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and press T one time to warp this ahead a little faster. Oops, almost overshot. That was really close. So you do got to watch your time warp there so that you don't overshoot, because it gets really sensitive when you get down to that last point. But this is what I was talking about. If you look at this green line, you can see it's stretched out and it's going beyond the base. And if you look down here, you can see that it shows that we would actually be ending up somewhere down in the Bahamas, actually almost touching South America. I think that's actually good enough. So I'm going to detach the trunk, and you'll see as soon as I do that, this green line is going to shoot way up here because our aerodynamics are going to change. So here we go, shift in. And I don't know if you saw that, but it went from way down there to way up here. So the trunk is now separated. A couple things I want to do at this point. Actually, the first thing I'm going to do is press K to close that antenna, just so that I don't forget to do it. Technically, I wouldn't need to close that till I reach the entry interface, but I'm just going to do it now so I don't forget. There's a couple things I'm going to do now. I have translation on. I'm in the retrograde position, but I want to turn the retrograde autopilot off so that the retrograde autopilot doesn't fight me as I try to use the RCS thrusters. The first thing I want to do is bring this distance down to close to 0, but I'm not actually going to bring it all the way to 0. I'm going to leave it at about 10 kilometers, because as I come down through the atmosphere, this will actually get closer to 0 if I err on the high side. So let me do that. Also, by using the thrusters that way, it gives me separation from the trunk. Where did it go? It's already gone past me by quite a bit, but in any regard, doing this correction after I separated the trunk makes sure that I'm well away from the trunk and don't run any risk of hitting it on the way down. Okay, so I'm down to about 15 kilometers off base, but I'm also seeing that this is stretching out, and that's not what I want. So I'm going to go back to the retrograde position for a moment and use some RCS to close that down a little more. Okay, it's getting pretty close to where I want. Okay, let me turn the retrograde off again and get this closer to 10 kilometers. And I don't know if 10 kilometers is exactly right, but I know that if you bring it all the way to 0, then what will happen is as you come through the atmosphere, it'll start going the other direction. Whereas if I leave it at 10 kilometers, then as I come down through the atmosphere, this will get closer to the base instead of farther away. Okay, so now I can see this little green tail, or whatever you want to call it. It's past the base, down here, maybe around the Virgin Islands or something. I need it to be a little closer than that, so I'm just using a little bit of translation. Okay, now you see this, let me bring it up even farther. If you look at this, and maybe I'll bring up an external MFD just to make it nice and large. Except I'm going to have to shrink this down for a moment so I can have this available. Cape Canaveral, there we go. PG, PRJ, there we go. Okay, hopefully you can see this very easily now. This part here is where Aerobrake says I'm going to end up, and this is the base. Now, logically, you would think this should end here, but what I've found with the Dragon is that it comes up short. Not entirely sure why that is, but you know, with the Delta Glider or XR2, if you have this ending right on the base, it's really accurate, it's really close. But with this type of vessel, this comes up short, so I need this to be long. And I've found, just in my you know, attempts to understand how this works, that it needs to be long even beyond the far corner here. So let me translate out a little bit, and even that I don't think would be quite enough. Let me go just a little bit more. Okay, I think that will get me all the way to the base, plus a little bit more, because remember, I want to splash down out in the ocean. I don't really want to land actually at Cape Canaveral, though technically the Dragon, this version of it at least, has ground capability, so it can technically land on the ground, but I would prefer to land out in the ocean. So I think that will work. So let me go ahead and close this out. Turn off retrograde autopilot. And the next thing I need to do is to warp time ahead until I get to entry interface. And that will be when my altitude is 120 kilometers. So let me go ahead and warp time ahead to that point. Let me double check a couple things here. Okay, antenna's closed. Okay. Go ahead and warping time ahead to entry interface. So I'm reaching entry interface. I'm going to go ahead and go back to retrograde just to make sure that I'm in the right position. But I do think, and I'm not 100% certain on this, but I do think you actually want the autopilot off as you're coming through the atmosphere. Okay, so we're at entry interface. Let me bring up one more MFD. Bring up map MFD. It makes it easier to see exactly where we're at. So you can see we're somewhere out in the Midwest. There's not much I can do here except wait. If you do too much time acceleration as you get into the atmosphere, it doesn't go very well. So I'm just gonna have to sit and ride this out. I think I can get away with a little bit of time acceleration. Guess I don't need that to be in the middle, so I'll put it there. Press Control F2, and I think I can at least get through the upper atmosphere at 2 or 3x, so it doesn't take quite as long. But something to pay attention as we start hitting the atmosphere. If you watch this distance indicator, it should be getting closer to 0. And that's because the atmosphere is slowing us down, and the rotation of the Earth and whatnot. So, whereas if I brought it all the way to 0, then it would be getting into a, it'd be going the other direction. Let's check our altitude. We're at 95 kilometers. I'll go back to 1x real quick, and let me set the retrograde just one more time, just to make sure the vessel's oriented the way I want it to be oriented. And now I'll turn off the autopilot. Okay. And I've also noticed once you drop below 90 kilometers, yeah, you can see the vessel really starts to take on a life of its own. And notice what it did right there in aero brake. Remember how I had this extended all the way down there, and it just jumped way up here. So if I had this originally stopped right on the base, then this would have jumped from there to up there, and I would be landing somewhere in Georgia instead of down at the base. So that's why with this vessel it seems absolutely necessary to overshoot the base according to aero brake by about 4 squares. 1, 2, 3, plus you have to kind of imagine what another square would be like down there. And that'll get you to the base and then out in the ocean somewhere. And there's the distance to the base coming down. So we're getting closer to the base instead of further away. Set that to the side for a moment. Close out that. And just take a look at where we're at and where we're going. Sometimes it's hard to get the camera angle you want. Guess that's the best. Bring this back over. Let's go back inside for a moment so we can see our other MFDs. According to aero brake, we're still pretty good target-wise. Zoom in here a little bit. See our distance is getting closer and closer to the base, so we should fly right overhead. Wave to the guys down there at the vehicle assembly building, and then hopefully splash down just several kilometers out in the ocean. See the distance? Everything's coming along pretty well. It's still looking pretty good with aero brake. So it looks like technically we could have even gone maybe 12 or 13 kilometers, because now we're increasing the other direction, but that's okay. It's very close nonetheless. Take a look at the outside. You can see we're flying right over top of Cape Canaveral, so our targeting was quite good. There's the launch pads, there's the runways. It's the vehicle assembly building. And our airspeed's quite low. Well, relatively speaking at least. Go ahead and zoom in the rest of the way. So there we are, passing Cape Canaveral, passing the beach, and we'll splash down out here in the ocean. Hopefully we'll be far enough out in the ocean that we don't have to worry about sailboats and all that, but I'm sure they could quarantine the area for us. Okay, there we have it. Now at this point, go ahead and close this out, because you can see we made it to our destination. And our airspeed is very low, so we're now basically falling straight down. So we don't have to worry about getting any further away from the base. Go ahead and take a look at the external view. And now I can go ahead and warp time ahead, because now all we're going to do is fall straight down. And that does take a while. So we're at 19 kilometers, 18, 17. I believe it's somewhere around, I want to say 10 kilometers that the drogue chute comes out. Let's go ahead and warp time ahead till that drogue chute comes out. There's the drogue chute. Now if we take a look at the inside, we can see we're at 8 kilometers. We're down to very soft descent here. And got the base within view. Let's go ahead and warp time ahead until the main chutes come out. And there are the main chutes. So now we're going very slow. We're only at 10 meters a second and getting slower. And we've got about 5 kilometers to go until splashdown. So I'm definitely going to warp time ahead to get through that, because that will take quite a while at 10 meters a second. Should I can go all the way to 100?
2,500. 1,500. 400. 300.
Just got a couple 100 meters to go. Go ahead and warp time ahead, get a little closer.
100.
And we'll go ahead and watch the splashdown. Of course, we don't get much of a splashdown in orbiter because the water is basically solid. And there we have it. Touchdown. And the parachutes descend down into the water and sink away. One of these days, hopefully, we'll get some better water effects. And there you have it. That's basically everything. I know technically you can depressurize the Dragon capsule and you can open the hatch, but off the top of my head, I don't remember what the right keys are for that, so I'm not going to do it. And that will be the end of this video and the completion of my Dragon flight. So I took the Dragon from Cape Canaveral up to the ISS, docked it, then we undocked, deorbited, and brought it right back down near Cape Canaveral. If you like this video, leave some kind of comment down below. I always like to hear and see what your comments are. And otherwise, we'll catch you in the next video.